It's a good day because Yogi Roth is here at Big 12 Media Day, Sports 360 AZ, out here in Vegas. Yogi, how you doing, man? It's good to see you.
It's great to see you. Every time I see you, I get a huge smile on my face, and that's the infectious personality of you. It's been such a joy to watch you over the course of years, and to see you here at Big 12 Media Days is even better, man. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. It's weird. This has been weird, and I'm sure it's been very weird for you this past year. Just what do you think about how all this went down? The mountain schools or the four corner schools now here in the Big 12.
Yeah, it's reality, right? I think seeing it in this stadium is unique. Last time I was in this stadium, I was with Ashley Adamson on the big Jumbotron hosting the pregame show for Oregon UW. And now we're here with the Big 12 with the schools that you referenced. So yeah, it's kind of funky in that regard, but it's also great to see faces that you know. And also, like, we have to embrace radically the reality of it too. And there's still excitement around it because it's still ball, right? And I can't wait to watch Utah and Arizona and ASU and Colorado, see if they can make some noise. I think a couple of them will moving into this new league and have fun with it, So it's been fun for me to see so many old faces and also some guys like Garrett Green at West Virginia, like quarterbacks that have gone through the Elite 11 that I haven't talked to or seen in a couple years because I'm working out on the West Coast, and now you're crossing over in a bunch of different ways.
Mm-hmm. And you have a new project, Y Option. Tell me about what's going on with you.
Yeah, so I've been in the podcast game, as long as you have. Pac-12 had owned my podcast the last couple of years, and as the Pac-12 changed, I got it back. And over the course of the season, as I was calling games, I would be talking to ADs and coaches and fans. And I'd say, where are you going to hear the stories of your teams next year? To the schools, how are you going to tell the stories of your teams? For the Big 12, there's no Big 12 network, right? So it's on the schools to do it. We're just speaking to your fan base for the most part. So there's got to be a way where they can cross over. And I don't want to abandon, 8 of the schools if I'm just calling games in the Big 10. I want to make sure that I'm talking about everybody. So Jim Thornby and I just kept ideating on it all season long. And by the end, we said, okay, I think there's an idea here. Let's call it Y Option, which is an old school West Coast offensive term, as you know. All these schools on the West Coast were looking for options, as was I, as was Jim, and my name's Yogi, so it kind of fit. So it's a podcast about college football through the lens of the West Coast. So we'll talk about ASU. We'll also talk about the lens of the West Coast when they play West Virginia, and what is that like? We'll talk about USC, but we'll also talk about Penn State and Michigan. And I've got relationships in a lot of those places, so I think it'll be fun, because all too often in our sport, the narrative is coming from the Northeast or the Midwest, and as of late, the Southeastern part of the country. And the West Coast really isn't driving a conversation that's factual versus opinionated, that is thoughtful instead of screaming. So hopefully my personality that you've heard over the course of 20 years now is going to remain the same, and we're going to do it on a more consistent basis. So you can check it out at yoption.com.
Mm-hmm. And you got the legend, Jim Thornby.
The legend.
Helping.
I can't believe I got him.
Yeah,
like, what 5-star signee, man. It was awesome.
Yeah.
So really stoked for that. And, our friendship. And, Jim was the first guy I met when I got to the Pac-12, along with Ashley Adamson and Mike Yam. Ironically, our first episode drops tomorrow, and it's Ashley Adamson, Mike Yam, and Jim and I just reflecting back on the time at the Pac-12 networks, kind of putting that conversation to bed to a degree as we move forward with the season.
And now focusing on the Big 12, as you see the conference in its new iteration, the 4 new schools, 8 in, 2 out over the past 2 years, what do you think this conference looks like the next couple of years?
Well, I think it's an assortment of logos. I don't think there's a lot of brand identity right now, if you're just being real, because there's been so much turnover.
Sure.
Right? So I think if you're a Big 12 fan, I still think about Nebraska. They haven't been in there over a decade, right? I think about Texas and OU. They're obviously departing. I don't think Big 12 and think of any of the new schools that are entering it. But when I think of the schools that are entering it and you look at the landscape of the league, say there's a real opportunity to make some noise in a different manner than in the Pac-12. Colorado was going to struggle in the Pac-12. They did for a really long time. Arizona State, you're kind of behind the 8 ball to a certain degree. Always have an opportunity to make noise, but it was top heavy. I mean, there were some brands that have really done a lot of work. When I look at the Big 12, I don't say it's wide open. I mean, you got teams that have proven themselves in K-State and Oklahoma State, Kansas as of late, but Utah's a real favorite. I mean, they were picked to win the league. I would totally agree. I might have picked them to win the Pac-12. Them and Oregon would have been the 2 best teams if that thing was still together in the way it was a year ago. And then I look at Arizona, real contender in this league versus just a sleeper in the Pac-12. They would have been a darling in the Pac-12. I think there's a real shot that they could play Utah for the Big 12 championship. So It's different, but it's also kind of on brand. The Big 12 has always been a little wacky to me. It's been fun, it's been chaotic, it's in spread offenses, it's been dynamic. I think it'll be that with the styles of the new teams that you referenced and some of the old ones in Texas Tech and Baylor.
And as we look at Arizona, maybe the most unique offseason a team can have in this era, where you have a new head coach, you have a new AD, but the core of the guys stuck together. How unique is that to you, and what does that say about Coach Brennan, that he was able to keep that core together?
Well, it's who he is. I've got to know Coach Brennan for about 15 years. We met when he was at Oregon State, coaching Brandon Cooks and company, and I've always felt, and this is often said, the word culture, but I think he's as good as anybody in college football at building and sustaining culture. Okay, what's an example? They win the Mountain West in 2020, and his next calendar year, he spent seeking counsel and advice from people who have had sustained success over a long period of time. Phil Jackson, Steve Kerr, Pete Carroll, notorious winners in sport. And that's just a glimpse of who he is. And then when I talked to the players, I just met with Noah Fafita for a little while, and I said, what's it been like? And he goes, everything he said he was about, he's been about. And that is who Brennan is. So I think it's a tight group. I think the staff is really impressive. You look at offensive coordinator, I've known Dino Babers, he coached me at Pitt way back in the day. You look at Danny Gonzalez, of course what they've done with Dwayne Aquina, keeping him and making him the defensive coordinator. It's a rock solid staff. And to your point, players, for the most part, didn't all bolt with turnover, and they could have. There was opportunities there, but they really threw down, I think, on a legacy opportunity. And I think in this portal era, too many players leave, and then really after another year or so, where's home for them? Did the alumni really show up for them? For Noah, T-Mac, Jacob, Big Jonah, all these players, Arizona alums, this is going to be home forever. And I think, sadly, we're probably not going to be talking about that in the ways that we had 5, 10, 20 years ago when it comes to college sports and college football.
Yeah. With Arizona State, year 2 of the Dillingham era, we've seen the progress, and a rough year last year, a lot of injuries, but we see them attack the transfer portal, them attack the recruiting. What do you foresee for the Sun Devils here in this next year?
I think in this era of turnover with new coaches, when you take over an environment that has struggled, right? It's different. Brent Brennan took over an environment that was rebuilt and really successful. Kenny Dillingham took over an environment that was chaotic, under investigation, really struggled. So to me, last year was kind of like a year 0 to a degree. Like, just get your foot in the door, establish a foundational culture, and now you look at Marcus Arroyo, you look at the staff coming in, you look at the players that they've added via the portal, also some guys they've developed. Okay, now there's a foundation set. I think this thing's got a shot to be what it's always been talked about, which is that quote, sleeping giant. And I think when you look at the Big 12 now, and you want to play in a warm weather, metropolitan city that's got a bunch of media opportunities, NIL opportunities, look at all the logos. Who else can provide that in a major market with the demographic, the temperature, like all of the things that city can provide? They got a chance to really roll because they're different than everybody else in that league and what they can provide. They got energy with, of course, Kenny Dillingham, now with Graham as the athletic director, a big fan of that. And I think one of the best hires in the offseason was Marcus Arroyo. I really do, man. He was courted at every big-time school, NFL teams, known him as well for a long time. Another guy who was mentored by Dick Tomey. He's a stud. He's an absolute star. So I think this thing is about to take off. I think this year, I don't think they're going to finish last. I'd put a month's salary on that. I really believe that for what they've built and what they'll be X and O wise. I think they'll steal a couple wins, and I can't wait to watch them compete.
Yogi Roth, best in the business. Make sure to check out Y Option on any podcast platforms. Where can they find it?
Go to yoption.com. It's pretty simple. We're on Substack, so it's also going to be written. It's going to be video. It's going to be audio. It's going to be a really fun place to play for us to really celebrate the game through the lens of the West Coast, which I think college football fans on the East Coast want to know what it's like. What do you think about us at Alabama? What do you think about us at Ohio State? And in addition, let's celebrate and pump out the stories of the players at Arizona, Arizona State, and the schools alike.
All right, you want to learn something? Follow Yogi Roth.